You guys get sassy, Jeff, today.
Welcome in. It is week 15. It is the Football Guys DFS Show. We have postseason fantasy football, but regular season football still going on. And for us, DFS world, it's still much of the same. So we are in, and Zach Charbonnet did not win Devin money last week. But Devin, how are you doing on here today?
About to be foreclosed on my house. Zach Charbonnet and his 3 carries longer than 15 yards, which he had not done in his 123 career carries. He had 2 carries longer than 15 yards. Anyway, so if anyone wants to buy a house before it gets foreclosed, let me know. No, I'm just joking. Bet responsibly and practice proper bankroll management so you don't lose your house. Anyway, we're recording on Thursday, so sorry this is a day late. It's my fault. Hand up. I screwed up. But let's get into it, shall we?
Absolutely. So we have Devin Knotts, of course, myself, Jeff Bellin, and as always, our good friend Phil Alexander. And we're going to be going through your cash game and your GPP lineups in DraftKings, primarily, maybe touch FanDuel too. But Phil, how are you doing, and kind of what games are you watching this week?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Glad to see that we're back to a 12-game slate after all of those bye weeks last week. So we're back to having a lot of different directions that we could go. The pricing this week is interesting, a bit more separation than usual amongst the high-end quarterbacks and the second and third tiers. Roster percentages seem to be bunched pretty tightly, which again means that there's a lot of different things that we could do, I think, both in cash and GPP. And insofar as games we're targeting, the first one's kind of interesting, right? Because Bills at Lions is like the obvious game of the week. It's got a 54-point total, yet the ownership is not catching that game because of the way that both offenses tend to spread out their production. So it's going to be interesting. That's definitely a game that I'm targeting for tournaments. But like I said, the spread production combined with the fact that the pieces are expensive means that we got to be very, very deliberate about what we're doing with the pieces of that game. Other than that, we are looking at Bengals -5 at Titans. We'll see if the Titans can go back and forth. I mean, everybody else this year seems to be able to do it with Cincinnati, so hopefully Will Levis is capable. I really like the Dolphins at Texans game, although, again, it doesn't look like the roster percentages are really reflecting that, but I think there could be a lot of scoring in that one, too. It's got a 47-point total. Texans favored by 3 points at home. Other than that, we've got some big favorites to look at, too. But what do you guys think? Is there anything I missed?
Quit watch versus quit watch. It'll be like the South Park episode where their little league teams are trying to lose. Carolina versus Dallas. Both defenses are just horrible.
Yeah, Carolina's favored for the first time in 33 games. So over 2 seasons, Carolina is catching the first time that they're favored going into a game. So good for them. I think that we're watching some injuries. What's going to go on? Justin Herbert is going to be a key injury because you could see a healthy Justin Herbert going up against Tampa's defense and kind of that game kind of pushing a little bit more than the 45.5 total. But maybe that leans to mentioning Justin Herbert's health. And I think that's, but you mentioned it, sides. Baltimore should get pretty healthy coming off a bye against the Giants. That should be a big spot. Washington without Derek Carr against New Orleans. That should be another big spot. Let's hit our quarterbacks. We're going to do our cash games now. We'll look at where are you guys leaning on your cash game quarterbacks? And Devin, you want to lead it off here?
Yeah. I think if Justin Herbert's healthy, I think he's certainly the guy that I'm looking at. And he practiced on Thursday and seemed to be fine. The other guy that I would look at is Bryce Young. I mean, he at 5,300, his price is still a little bit too low. I know Jeff gets a little bit excited about that, but
welcome to the dark side.
I don't think I would do it. I think I would rather have Herbert, but he's certainly at least intriguing.
Anthony Richardson, does Denver's defense scare you off there, or is it just the unpredictability of what you get from Anthony Richardson?
Both. I mean, Denver had the Jameis Winston game, and like people think they're a bad defense. I just think that was a Jerry Jeudy revenge game where somehow the Broncos didn't shadow Patrick Surtain on him, and he went off. But Denver, I mean, coming off the bye, I think if I remember right, Sean Payton's really good against off buys. I don't remember, but yeah, I don't know. I don't love that game. It's at Denver too, which I don't typically like to play. Like Anthony Richardson pulled himself out of a game because he ran the ball like 7 times. What's he going to do in the fourth quarter in Mile High? He's going to be out of gas, and Joe Flacco's probably going to come in. So, is there upside there? Yes. Do I trust it in cash? Probably not.
Phil, are you in a similar place in cash, or are you looking for something else?
I was kind of like completely off the board in cash because I wasn't considering Justin Herbert because of the injury. So, like, usually what I do when I create a cash game lineup is before I look at any projections and before I look at really anything, I just go in and try to hand build a lineup, looking at the pricing on the slate for the first time. And usually I line up pretty close with the consensus when I do that. This week I didn't, and what I'm seeing is that Kyler Murray seems to be the guy at the top of the ownership board once I looked. And I guess I get it. I mean, the Cardinals are favored by 6. They're playing at home. They're implied to score over 26. So, in theory, that's a good spot for a quarterback. But in the last 2 games, Murray's kind of hit his median projection. That's like 3x his current salary. It's fine. He obviously has upside from there that he hasn't been hitting, but like he hasn't been good since the bye week. The Cardinals are 0-3 since the bye. Murray has 3 touchdowns against 4 interceptions. He's below 20 rushing yards in 2 of those games. So, like, I do think he's fine, but I also think he's far from safe. So I was a little bit surprised to see him at the top. The name that I clicked on that the projections absolutely positively do not agree with whatsoever is Tua Tagovailoa at 6,100. So for essentially the same price as Murray, you're getting the last 4 games with at least 24 DraftKings points, multiple touchdowns in 4 straight, 300 plus yards in 3 straight, over 40 pass attempts in 3 straight, completion percentage north of 70% in every single game since week 8. And now we look at Houston's last 3 games and we see 354 yards against Cooper Rush, which granted was game script oriented. But then 2 weeks ago, 278 and 2 in a home loss to Will Levis. And then last week, Mac Jones comes off the bench for 235 and 2 against Houston. So, like, why do people think that they're slowing a red hot Tua down? They're implied to score 24. I think it makes him fine and a safer bet than Murray, but I don't know if I'm inclined to do it just because in cash, like I look at that projection number and that's kind of all that I look at. But the I guess it's science and art, right? And the art side of it for me said 2 is a good play.
Yeah, I have
mean,
no issue.
It's going to be indoors, so they're not going to stop playing because it's under 50 degrees. So that's going to be good.
Yeah, I have no issue with Tua. I mean, I think Kyler Murray's been better than what you said he has. I mean, he has 250 yards or more in each of his last 4 games. The touchdowns haven't been there, but I think Kyler's fine. But yeah, I mean, Tua certainly has the upside there. Houston's defense has been like, yeah, they're struggling as of late, but I give them a little bit more credit there. People just don't like playing Tua. Like they've been burned enough times with injuries and struggles, and the lack of running really hurts him. So, certainly you get more upside with Kyler just because of the rushing touchdown equity there. But that's pretty binary in the sense of like he's either going to rush for a touchdown or he's not. And the sense is like I get why Kyler's popular, but I don't mind the Tua call at all.
All right. Makes
The
me feel a little bit better then.
The Jets quitting. They played hard last week. The Jets are quitting.
The defense has quit.
Okay.
But doesn't that
I think
mean?
it's
I mean, I we'll talk about GPPs in a second, but I think Rodgers is certainly a good GPP play. He's sort of playing for his future. Like, he hasn't quit. If he wants a job next year and he wants to play in the NFL, like, he has a 4-game audition, is the way I'm looking at it.
first 300-yard day last week since 2021, so he's got that going. But
I mean, there's two ways to look at it. One, it's like, what are the odds that he's going to throw for 300 again? And two, it's the guy needs to play well in order to show some team, probably not the Jets, that he can still play.
We can't go to North Carolina and enjoy a Bill Belichick. But Phil, what are you looking at for running backs here for your cash games?
Yeah, I think the easiest click on the slate is probably Chuba Hubbard at 6,500, especially now that there's the injury to Jonathan Brooks. Not that Hubbard was really in danger of losing his starting job anyway, but in no danger now of losing reps against the Cowboys' rush defense, which is weak. Last week, tough matchup against the Eagles. We saw Hubbard with 30 total touches, and a repeat of that workload would not shock me. I see Devin shaking his head, so I'm interested in the rebuttal because that one seemed really clear to me this week.
I like Chuba. He's just not the easiest button to click this week. That's Rico
Okay.
Dowdle.
Okay, he was the next guy on my list. Rico Dowdle at 6,100, so both running backs in that game. So the case for Dowdle is pretty evident too. Over 70% of the snaps in each of the last 2 games. They finally did the right thing and gave him the lead back job. He's been the only running back with any type of burst on that roster since week 1, so it took them long enough. Last week, 77% of the snaps was a season high. He looked great against a terrible rush defense, which has been the case the last 2 weeks against the Bengals and the Giants. Panthers are also terrible. They allow 37.5% more fantasy points than league average to running backs. The median projection I have on Dowdle is 18 DraftKings points, so that's a 3x multiple. A touchdown would easily get him over 20. So I think you're definitely playing those guys. And then this looks like a 3 running back week for me, probably with Chase Brown being the third. 7,200 is probably enough to make me think twice against the Titans, who have a solid rush defense. But when it comes to Brown, he should probably be more like 75, 7,600. He's the running back 3 on DraftKings since Zach Moss went out, and he's priced at the running back 7. He's just got too much of a great role in a great offense really to fade at this point. So it's up in the air, but curious what else you're looking at, Devin.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify on Dowdle, like the Panthers are allowing 139 rushing yards to opposing running backs per game. The next closest team is allowing 118. So they're allowing 21 rushing yards more than the second worst team to the running back position. This team, they're still playing hard, but there's literally nothing they can do. Like they have 7 guys in their front 7 that just shouldn't be in the NFL at this point. And that's not good. So certainly it's a spot where I think Chuba and Rico Dowdle are both underpriced. I don't typically like playing in cash the running backs on both sides of the ball just because, like, I don't know, it kind of does add to your risk.
I wondered about that. I was going to ask about that. So that's good.
I think that this is sort of an exception week where, like, I want to start Dowdle, and then Chuba's just underpriced. Chase Brown is fine. He's fine. I don't love him. I don't love the price. I don't really love the matchup all that much. If I could find a way to get up to 8,300, I think Derrick Henry is really intriguing going up against the Giants. The Giants are one of the worst run defenses in the NFL this season. So coming off the bye, Are they going to need Lamar Jackson to run the ball that much? I don't know, but certainly Henry could play a big role there. And then the last guy that I'll throw out there, if Bucky Irving misses, which it looks like on Thursday he's going to, I think Rachaad White is at least intriguing at 5,800, a little bit higher price than I'd like him to be. In a lot of the roster percentages really haven't caught up yet. He's still about 2% rostered, which is just incorrect. Facing a Chargers defense that, like, the Chargers sound scary when it comes to opposing running backs, but they're allowing 4.5 yards per carry on the season. And, they've allowed 100 yards or more to running backs in 2 of their last 3 games, albeit that was to Bijan Robinson and Derrick Henry. But still, I mean, if I just look at DraftKings points as of late, 28 to Bijan, 31 to the Baltimore duo of Henry and Hill, and then 19 to Chase Brown. So I think Rachaad White is at least intriguing there.
When is Isaiah Pacheco going to go back to being a bell cow for the Chiefs?
When are the Chiefs going to have a good offense?
Yeah, well, maybe when Jameis Winston throws them the ball on defense and sets them up pretty well there.
I mean, that's the problem. I just don't trust anything with the Chiefs right now. Like, Travis Kelce has burned me last week. Who do you trust at receiver there? I mean, Hopkins is up and down. The whole team is just like, I don't want to say it because it'll really get us in trouble. But
they're 12-1, but yes, I hear you. It's
they like to party a little bit too much. We'll just put it that way, with a certain pop star.
It's funny to me that they're 12-1 and everybody just kind of rags on them. But if they had 12-1 and they couldn't stop a nosebleed, but their offense was going off, everybody would be in love with them.
Well, they have the best defense in the NFL. Like, it's not even close.
Yes,
it's like it's not even a debate who the best defense is. They're in their own tier. I mean, it's clearly the Chiefs, and people just don't think of them that way.
Yeah. Wide receivers. Devin, what are you looking at? How are you building out your wide receivers in your cash game lineup?
Yeah, this one's hard. I mean, if I just look at who's going to be popular this week, I think the guy that I'm starting with, Garrett Wilson. We have to meet Jeff's quota. I want a piece of the Jets against Jacksonville. Look, I mean, Jacksonville's on quit watch. They certainly are a team where both the running game and the passing game, and they've been atrocious against both recently. But I wasn't impressed by either Braylon Allen or Isaiah Davis last week. I didn't think either one of them looked all that great. So I think that, again, if Rodgers is going to prove that he can play, one of these receivers is going to have a big day. And I think it's Wilson. He's a little bit cheaper than Adams, but I could see either one of them having quite the big week. I want to go back to Ladd McConkey if he's healthy, which I think he is, and Justin Herbert plays. He's just been really consistent. I mean, 6,300 is a fair price for him. And, he's not a guy that's going to win you a lot of GPPs, I don't think. But, I feel pretty good about him. But I guess it sort of depends on what we do at tight end, because there is a smart play that's pretty cheap at the tight end position. So you could certainly look down there. And if you did, then you probably don't want 2 Chargers on that game. And then, I hate this. It's my least favorite thing in football, whether we play T. Higgins or Jamar Chase. And like, I want one of them, especially if I'm not playing Chase Brown. Jamar Chase has been so darn good, but I think I'm going to go with T. Higgins just because he fits what I'm trying to do. You know what? Give me Jamar Chase. 20 or more DraftKings points in 4 straight games. But what you're really chasing, and if you can afford him and figure out a way to fit him in, and again, there's a smart play at tight end. what you're really chasing is the 45 plus point performances that he's had in 2 of his last 4 games. I don't know that I trust Tennessee's secondary as much as I do their run defense. So Jamar Chase is the guy that I'm going to be looking at this week.
I just need to stop and say for Devin, in wide receiver, you used chasing and wide receiver and smart play at tight end in the same sentence, and that is just phenomenal.
Just a masterclass.
I really appreciate that. Yes, I appreciate that masterclass.
It's the weave.
Very good. Phil, what are you looking at here this for wide receivers?
I'm looking at a great moment in broadcast history. I mean, that was amazing.
I said nothing. That's the funny part. Like, I literally said nothing.
Yeah, I'm thinking along the same lines for the most part, right? Jamar Chase, he's the only player on this slate, I think, that you could realistically give him a median projection over 20 DraftKings points. And, maybe that Monday night game is still fresh in our heads. But I think there's a strong case that the way he's playing, he just belongs in our cash game lineups if he's sub 9K, which he is. That probably means that Chase Brown right now isn't doable. But Devin mentioned the 5,800 for Rashad White. There's also injuries at running back to Tony Pollard and Alvin Kamara that we're watching on Thursday night, which would potentially open up even more value and make it really easy to get.
We're not doing Jamal Williams, though, are we?
Oh, definitely not. It's Kendre Miller and Tyjae Spears.
I forgot Kendre Miller was back. That's my bad.
Yeah, he's back. So thankfully we're marked safe from Jamal Williams this week. So aside from Chase, I like Cortland Sutton at 6,600. Sutton has 19 plus DraftKings points in 5 of his last 6. Dominates team targets for the season. He's over a 25% market share. 3 out of the last 4 Colts games have reached a total of 49 points or more. That includes games against the putrid offenses of the Jets and Patriots. And we've seen Denver games get that high in more or less half their games this year, even though they are a good defense, like on paper and in practice, but they do invite some shootout environments. So I think this could be a sneaky game. I think it could go back and forth. I think it could definitely go over the total. And, Denver has some trouble running the ball. So I like Sutton. How many Carolina Panthers is too many for a cash game lineup? Probably 2, but I do like Adam Thielen in addition to Chuba Hubbard. It's hard to argue with a combined 21 targets, 200 receiving yards, and a touchdown in the last 2 games combined. Last week's 22 DraftKings points came against a really tough Philly secondary. So the only thing that's got me a little bit nervous about plugging in Thielen, besides the fact that he's like this old dusty receiver that plays for the Carolina Panthers, is that Jalen Coker is back for this game. And for all you Coke heads out there, we haven't seen what the rotation looks like with Thielen and Coker yet. They haven't played in a game together. Personally, I don't see them taking Bryce Young's safety blanket, Thielen, out of the slot. For Coker, I think Coker is probably going to end up seeing David Moore's playing time, and Thielen's role will be safe. Outside of that, I like McConkey a lot. I think if I was going with Chase Brown and not Jamar Chase, I'd probably be playing McConkey, like Devin said. And I'll leave it at that.
What about it's getting cold? And what type of animal likes the cold? A penguin.
Julio Shakir.
A penguin. And what do penguins do? They waddle. Jalen Waddle has looked much better. He's 95 yards or more in 2 of his last 3 games. 9 for 99 against the Jets and 8 for 144 against the Patriots. Had a disappointing game against the Packers on Thanksgiving, but I just throw that game out because it was cold in Miami. didn't show up. Apparently, waddling isn't cool in the snow. But I think that at 5,700, I kind of feel better about. I mean, you could play both Waddle and Thielen, but I feel a little bit better about Waddle just because of the quarterback situation. And if you want to stack him in a GPP, you certainly could. But
I was going to say, if I didn't need the couple hundred, I would probably play Brian Thomas instead of Thielen.
Yeah, I like Thomas too.
Yeah, Derek Stingley, if he's going to travel, if he's going to follow Tyreek Hill, that could open things up for Waddle to be kind of that guy that goes off in that spot. Amari Cooper at 5,300 got 14 targets last week. You talk about that Bills-Lions game. Maybe it's a little bit too risky for cash, but when I've got a 54.5 point total and a guy that got Amari Cooper 14 targets from Josh Allen just a week ago.
Worst trade in sports.
Which one? The one Dallas did or the one Cleveland did?
Cleveland to Buffalo for Amari Cooper.
Yeah. That's the worst trade by the Bills because they haven't used him. All right. Let's look at tight ends. And Devin, I already know Devin is very intelligent about tight ends this week. But what are you thinking here, Devin?
I mean, is Will Dissly officially out?
I think so. I think that's a multi-week injury.
Stone Smart, 2,600. Don't overthink it. How many smart jokes can I make in an hour?
We are pushing the limit.
I told you you're getting Sassy Jeff today.
No, it's 2,600. You can't beat that. From the role that we saw last week and going up against the Buccaneers defense that's been beat through the air. Anybody else, it's Trey McBride's not scoring touchdowns and he cost 3 times as much. So, yeah, I mean, Mark Andrews at 4,100 kind of stood out a little bit to me there. But other than that, I don't like the board enough to pass up that value on Stone Smart.
Jordan Akins is the only other player at 2,700 that I would consider. Like, Njoku's out, so I think Akins is at least intriguing.
Phil, you have anything else?
No, just that I really like Stone Smart too. I have tweeted about him, I think 3 times in the last couple of days, which for me qualifies as a tweet storm because I am not tweeting all that much usually. But I just think that he is he's more than a bum who is stepping into playing time. This guy's athletic, former college quarterback at Old Dominion. He's got the measurables, and he flashed with the first decent playing time he's really received in his career last week. And anytime an athlete like that flashes in limited opportunity at that tight end position, that's when my ears perk up. Not to mention he's playing with a good quarterback in a great matchup. So as long as Justin Herbert is good, Stone Smart, absolutely the play.
Phil, you changed your Twitter profile, and it really threw me off when I saw you talking about Stone Smart today. Your picture was different. I didn't know what to expect there. But, all right, we're going to open it up here. We're going to look at our GPP plays. But first, please take a minute to like and subscribe and do all those fun things. And thank you so much for being here all year long, and we really do appreciate it. Drop your questions in here, thoughts, comments, whatever it might be. Phil didn't talk about every game this week, so if you want to give him some feedback on games that he missed, feel free to do that as well. And then also head to footballguys.com/plans to become a Hall of Fame subscriber. Hall of Fame subscribers get access to all DFS content for less than $20 monthly. So we're nearing the end of the year. Hopefully, if you're thinking about Christmas, you want to renew that subscription, something like that would be fantastic. And we'll have content for you all year round, but not DFS. We
did an audit of how many articles we did this year, and the year's not done. 1,900 articles. And if you do that on like a cost per dollar, it's like free. Just saying.
All right. GPP plays. Phil, what are you looking at for your quarterback on your GPP plays?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I think Colts and Broncos could be sneaky high scoring, and you mentioned Richardson back in the cash game section. I see him as a more of a GPP play. probably for the reasons that you were thinking, right? He's got upside as a rusher and as a deep passer. We know that tournament winning scores are within his range of outcomes. I think he may not tap out after a couple of runs this time because the Colts season is pretty much on the line in this one. So I think they go at it like it's their Super Bowl, and that could lead to some good back and forth action. The guys at the top, right? Josh Allen, 8,500. How do you not get a piece of Josh Allen every week after what he showed last week in tournaments? Lamar Jackson, 8,300 as a 16-point favorite against the Giants.
Is that a good thing, though?
They got to score the points somehow, right?
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't like playing Lamar when they're that big of favorites. Maybe it's just because I've seen it so many times against my putrid low life Browns teams where like he just doesn't run because they're huge favorites and they end up not covering and they kind of just play with their food a little bit.
That's fair. And the game script certainly favors Derrick Henry, but I think there's a case to be made given the implied total for the Ravens that Lamar Jackson is definitely worth considering in tournaments. Jaden Daniels, 7,500 going up against the hapless Jake Hayner led Saints. And then, of course, Joe Burrow at 7,300. So that's a long way of saying I think you could pay up for quarterbacks. And then I will give you one more. So speaking of playing this game like it's their Super Bowl, do you think that your Browns are up for playing a game like it's their Super Bowl? No, you don't think
no,
they want to?
That was against the Ravens several weeks ago. This team's awful.
Okay. All right, because I'm up in the air on Jameis Winston. I think that, yes, Kansas City does have the best defense in football, but they have not been generating much of a pass rush recently. And if Winston has time to throw, we know where it goes. It goes way down the field. And, all it takes, like we've seen over the last couple of weeks, is Jerry Jeudy getting free in the vertical passing game. And all of a sudden, Winston's putting up a big number. So super high variance. Yes, he could bomb. But I also
you're going to do that. Stack the Chiefs defense with him because, Chris Jones is going to be on Jermaine Ifedi, who's like the Browns' 7th tackle at this point of the season. Not quite, but just hang with me here. And I think Jones can cause disruption. Spagnuolo might just blitz every single play, and it could be a very long day for Cleveland. Certainly, if you throw a pick six, guess what? It's actually your friend in DFS because you're getting the ball right back and you're throwing the ball in a game script. So, that's the Jameis Winston effect. Yeah, you get a -1, but who cares? Stack.
I just heard maybe Jerry Jeudy out of that whole thing. So,
yeah, I'm staying. I would just bet on the Chiefs. How about that?
Devin, what are you looking at for your quarterbacks?
Bo Nix, 6,300 going up against the Colts. The Colts have been very up and down, and Bo Nix is in that must-win game to eliminate the Colts. So I think that the Broncos' playoff probability goes way up if they do win this game. So I think he's at least intriguing. Nobody's going to want to play Will Levis this week, and you should. Cincinnati's defense is amongst the worst in the NFL. They have the worst safety duo in Von Bell and Geno Stone. Geno Stone. I still have the smart on my mind. Not very smart, Jeff. So Geno Stone and Von Bell. So I think that Levis could certainly have a long play or two to Nick Westbrook-Ikine. Jaden Daniels was on my list. And that's kind of it that's been mentioned. Rodgers, we talked about. Levis, Kyler's. I don't love Kyler, especially if he's going to be the most popular guy. It's just too expensive. And how much is he going to have to run going up against New England? Richardson, I want no part of in Denver, but I already talked about that. And that's kind of it.
The Titans might be carrying some emotion going into that Bengals game with Brian Callahan, their coach, the former Bengals offensive coordinator. So, I think it ended on good terms, but that might be something to watch. Drake May at 5,600. He gives you a rushing floor there at 5,600. We've seen him have some decent throwing days. It's kind of like laying there under the radar a little bit. That could be a play, but I think we've got just about everything else off that board. Running backs. Devin, GPP running backs.
This is where I'm going to tell you to avoid Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard, because they are probably both going to be 25% rostered or higher this week. And especially, you can play one of them, but again, I wouldn't play both, because if one running back is having 20 carries, that just takes so much time off the clock. And normally when you have a heavy running game, it goes pretty quick. The game flows pretty quick. It's a low-scoring game. And it's just very rare that two running backs on the same game end up paying off. Especially with Dowdle. I mean, yeah, he's had over 100 yards in each of his last two games. Yeah, the matchup against Carolina is really good, but are we trusting a 25% plus Rico Dowdle? Are we trusting a 35% rostered Chuba Hubbard if they do end up that high? This week is all going to be about what value opens up. I think Tajay Spears will be one of the most popular players of the week if Tony Pollard does miss. Same with Kendre Miller. If Kamara misses, I'd prefer Spears, but I think both players are certainly viable there. Derrick Henry, only if you can get one of those guys, I think is going to shoot up the board. I think he has 100-yard and 2-touchdown, 150-yard and 2-touchdown upside going against the hapless Giants, and who knows where they're at going back to Tommy DeVito. A team just is an absolute dumpster. And then looking down the list, I do like Jahmyr Gibbs at 7,500. Buffalo's run defense really has not been all that great this season, so I think that Gibbs provides a nice upside. That he's going to be about 5% rostered, which is too low, especially if the Lions have some trouble throwing the ball against the Bills secondary, which certainly has been the strength of the team.
Phil, do you have plays for your GPPs?
I do. Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs was the first name on my list. So in the open, I mentioned that huge 54-point total in Bills and Lions, and the fact that ownership wasn't really settling on that game. And Devin just pointed out that Gibbs is one of those guys that's in that, he'll probably end up 5 to 7%. But he's a top tier back. I think that they'll need to cut him loose to keep up with Buffalo. And I do like the defensive matchup. I think running the ball on Buffalo is at least the path of least resistance, rather than testing their secondary. And James Conner, 6,600. I think if Murray does end up being the guy at quarterback that people gravitate towards, which I'm not 100% convinced is what's going to happen, but again, as of the early roster projections that are floating around the industry, that's what's being suggested. So Connor, even though he won't be like a contrarian play, I think he'll offer a smidge of leverage on some of those Kyler Murray stacks. He doesn't seem to be wearing down James Conner, and as long as the game script has been neutral or positive, he's been the guy on the field. He rarely comes off. So good matchup for running backs against the New England defense. They give up a lot of yardage, haven't given up many touchdowns on the ground recently, which is kind of shading the matchup, I think, a little bit. Devin mentioned Derrick Henry. I mean, if you're not taking a couple shots on Derrick Henry with the Ravens favored by 16 against a crappy rush defense, I'm not sure what to tell you. He belongs in your tournament plans. And if Tony Pollard plays, because he has made a habit of not practicing all week and then playing in games and seeing big workloads in those games. So we could be seeing more of the same with him missing Thursday's practice. And if that's the case, he's getting that Bengals defense that we just saw Rico Dowdle shred. So I guess it depends on how you see that game. If you see the Bengals blowing out the Titans, then you probably don't want to play much Pollard. But if you think that Tennessee has a chance of keeping the game script somewhat neutral, then Pollard is going to rack up a lot of touches, and he's going to do it against a really bad defense. And the injury stuff should only push him further down people's boards, which means he's going to end up a really strong GPP play if he's active.
Pollard has the craziest stat line this season that I've ever seen. So 7 straight games, over his last 7 games, he either has 20 or more carries or 10 or less carries. There's no in between. It's either the Titans get down very early and just throw caution to the wind and abandon the run completely, or they're in the game and they're giving him the ball 20 to 25 times. He hasn't had 15 carries since like September.
Do you guys think there's much overlap between the best ball world and the DFS world?
Sure.
I think there's a big sentiment in the best ball world that would love to see Saquon Barkley have a terrible day this week because of advancing in those types of things. And I think that there's some belief. I mean, people see Pittsburgh and see the wins, and Pittsburgh's defense against fantasy running backs, about middle of the pack. This isn't like a brutal matchup that there. And I think there might be some emotion involved in Saquon Barkley, and especially coming off last week with him kind of laying. I don't know if laying an egg is quite the right way to say it, but a spot that people thought he would go off in, not doing that. I mean, this might be a chance to catch some Saquon Barkley in a lower ownership situation at the top of the
He's
pool.
kind of like Josh Allen, right? I mean, he's going to go undervalued because of his price, but you should probably always have a share if you're building like 5 or more lineups.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting one because it does seem to me a lot of people cheering against Saquon Barkley this weekend. But wide receivers. Devin, what are you looking at your wide receivers for your DP? Actually, I think Phil. Phil, what are you looking at GPPs for your wide receivers this week?
Sure. This is where I'm playing the Jets guys, Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. Like we were talking about earlier, right? The offense looked good last week. They're playing against the Jaguars. Both of these guys see a ton of volume. I think I'd give a slight lean to Garrett Wilson because I think the target volume is just a touch more reliable, but they're going to combine probably for like 25 targets against a really bad defense. So as I'm saying it out loud, I'm reminded that Aaron Rodgers is probably a good tournament play, and stacking both of these guys with him is probably the way to go. One thought that I had too is we know that Rodgers plays like so banged up every year, and he's quiet about the injuries. You never know exactly what's wrong with him. Who knows? Maybe he's been playing hurt for quite a few weeks, and now he's feeling a little bit better. And last week was the start of something. It's possible. Outside of the Jets guys, I'm going to lump Nico Collins and Terry McLaurin together because I like them both for the same reason. They're high-end wide receiver ones who are capable of breaking any slate, and neither one of them projects for much ownership so far. I think I've seen the early projections have Collins in like that 5-6% range, McLaurin less than that. So at those rates, I'm willing to go substantially over the field on those guys. I especially like McLaurin playing in a dome against a terrible pass defense in the Saints. And then I don't think anybody wants to play Malik Neighbors anymore, right? With Tommy DeVito at quarterback, 6,400. But, he looked fine with that hip injury last week.
DeVito looked fine?
No. Lord, no. While Drew Lock was playing last week, he didn't look fine either. But Neighbors looked fine. I don't know. Maybe DeVito is an upgrade on Drew Lock. I didn't think that was going to be the case, but it may very well be. I mean, what else are the Giants going to be doing but chucking the ball? And where else does the ball go besides to Malik Neighbors? And the Baltimore pass defense is one that we like to pick on. So for sub 5%, less than 7K, the talent profile on Malik Neighbors is undeniable. I'll be playing some in tournaments for sure.
Devin, what do you see here?
If you don't want to play Stone Smart, and it might be smart not to do that, a way to save money this week could be get your puke bucket ready. Diami Brown, 3,100. Noah Brown is out. The Commanders should be able to move the ball however they want against the Saints. Saints have one of the worst secondaries in football. And, I mean, Brown saw 52% of the snaps last week. So he was a direct replacement for Noah Brown. He should see about 80% of the snaps this week. At 3,100, you could certainly do worse. Don't love it, but if he can have 5 for 50 at 3,100, and if he somehow finds the end zone, not saying it's going to happen, but like he's going under look this week, and he probably should be more higher look than the 4 or 5% that he is right now. A pivot off of CeeDee Lamb, or I just gave it away. A pivot off of Rico Dowdle is CeeDee Lamb this week. He's been kind of hit or miss with Cooper Rush. We've seen some good moments. We've seen some bad moments, but if Dowdle struggles and that game still shoots out, I think he certainly would be a big reason why. Calvin Ridley, I talked about how bad Cincinnati's defense is. If Cincinnati, he's a great comeback stack if you wanted to play like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and then Calvin Ridley, because we talked about how they're just going to abandon the run if Cincinnati gets out to a big lead. And he's certainly a pivot off of Chase Brown, who's also going to be popular. Regarding Jerry Jeudy, I think it entirely depends if Cedric Tillman is back. If Tillman plays, I don't want any part of Jeudy, but Judy's at least interesting if Tillman does go. The last guy that I'll throw out there, but like, what's going on with Jalen Hurts? Is he hurt?
He seems to be a little gun shy throwing down the field, that's for sure.
Like, A.J. Brown is going to be less than 1% rostered as of now. What are we doing?
I mean,
there is a squeaky wheel narrative there because
that's
he was
the
not
squeakiest
happy.
wheel that has ever squeaked
And
right now. So
you guys know that Denzel Ward doesn't shift sides. And who's on the other side of the ball? Martin Emerson, who's probably they don't play Cleveland. What am I doing?
They play the Steelers.
I quit.
They play the Cleveland. No, hey, yeah.
You know what? DeAndre Hopkins, who's going to face Martin Emerson, and he's going to have the big game. Do it.
It's a significant squeaky wheel. I mean, you're counting on touchdowns there because pass volume is not there at all in Philadelphia. You look at what they've really done. First 4 games, Hurts was averaging 33 attempts per game. The second half of the season, since week 5, it's about 20 attempts per game. So that, and they were 2-2, and now they haven't lost since. So that tells you exactly what's going on there. But I hear you.
If he gets activated, we're going back to Bub Means this week, especially if Kamara's out. He didn't get activated on Saturday last week, but he's 3K. If you wanted to play him over Diami Brown, I ain't going to be mad at you.
Zay Flowers at 6,000. He's had 6 or more targets every week going back the last 6 games. We haven't really gotten a big explosion game against the Giants on Quit Watch. I mean, that could happen. And then I think the other one that I was looking at, did maybe Joshua Palmer get unlocked a little bit last week with Ladd McConkey out? He had a really strong game against the Chiefs. We've kind of been waiting for that, I think, all year long, potentially. Maybe at 4,600, if you want to go down the board a little bit against the Buccaneers defense that is very gettable, that might be one that maybe they figured some things out.
I think we've been waiting on that one since 2021.
Well, we got it a little bit last week, so there you go.
Phil's favorite player who had 80% snap share and no production.
It's a whole lot of cardio going on there. Tight ends. Let's get tight end. What do you have outside of Stone Smart? If everybody's just going to play Stone Smart in every single lineup this week?
They shouldn't. I don't think he's a good GPP play. I would rather play Jordan Akins in a GPP, assuming that Njoku is out. The Browns have been pretty heavily utilizing their tight ends in the red zone. So I think the touchdown upside is certainly there. I think that Jawan Johnson is probably a better play in GPPs. I just think Stone Smart is going to be very popular. And like he's a guy. And Lad McConkey is back. So that ultimately takes share away from somebody. And, when I say he's a good play for cash, that's at 2,600 and hoping he gets 3 catches for 40 yards and gets 7 points and gets like 3x. I just don't necessarily see the upside of Stone Smart compared to some of the other guys on this slate.
Phil, what do you see?
I see Stone Smart catching a long touchdown. I think he does have upside, and I will be playing him in GPPs despite the fact that he's going to be popular. However, I'm probably going to say like that's an even with the field play, just because I happen to like the player or the idea of the player. Don't want to go overboard there in tournaments, especially if the ownership climbs. But Trey McBride
last week. Like, let's not go crazy.
Well, it wasn't in a full game, It was in when he picked up Disley's role after Disley went out.
You know who he is?
The Old Dominion quarterback from a couple of years ago.
He's Ricky Seals-Jones.
Yeah, I loved Ricky Seals-Jones. Give me Ricky Seals-Jones.
Like just this specimen who should be a wide receiver, but he's classified as tight end. He's Ricky Seals-Jones.
Give me that
Every
guy.
2,000 Ricky Seals-Joneses and Stone Smarts, there's one Darren Waller. So there you go.
That's right. I was going to call out Travis Kelce, who I know let down Devin last week, but I like him for the same reason that I liked Tyreek Hill last week, and that worked out. And it's that people are just sick of playing him because they do play him every week. They look at him as underpriced. They plug him in. He disappoints. And I think it's happened enough times now that he's probably going to go sub 10% on this slate. So low ownership, high target volume, all-time great player. I have to believe that he's going to score a touchdown at some point this season, and he's running out of time. So I think this could finally be the Travis Kelce game, and always get plenty of exposure to Trey McBride. I think he's cash viable on a different slate, not this one. And I don't care that he doesn't score touchdowns because he gets there anyway. They just force feed him the ball, and I like the matchup.
McBride is 6 catches away from tying Deontay Johnson's most receptions in a season without a touchdown. So they might want to try to break that one. You never know.
You guess how
Hunter
many
Henry. What?
He has 17 red zone targets without scoring a touchdown. That's ridiculous.
He's due.
Or there's just a problem.
That's the way math works.
Theoretically, if you get red zone targets, like eventually you're going to find your way into the end zone.
Yes. Hunter Henry, 4,300. I think that there could be some volume there for Hunter Henry going against the Arizona here. And Jonnu Smith, 5,400. Jonnu Smith not have anything at all for 60 minutes. Then they went to him 3 times in overtime. He won the game. And I think when you look at Derek Stingley, when you look at Jalen Waddle beat up a little bit, kind of carrying an injury into this game, could be Jonnu Smith over the middle of the field doing some work there. So that means that we get to do our favorite stacks of the week. And Phil, what's your favorite stack of the week?
Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin. And I do like Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton quite a bit as well.
Devin, what do you got?
I'm going to go, not my favorite. Actually, it is my favorite. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Calvin Ridley.
I'm going to say maybe we cracked something last week. Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson, and Devontae Adams, with maybe Brian Thomas coming back for a big play or two against a Jets defense that might be a little bit leaky. I think that we're starting to see the last couple of weeks the volume really go to both of those Jets receivers, and there's the chance here that they both go with Aaron Rodgers against a very light Jacksonville defense. Discount plays. What do you got, Phil?
Just say
I was gonna use De'Ami Brown as the 3K crapper here, but
You've been talking the
Devin
entire
got-
show about Stone Smart.
Oh, right. Well, I mean, we've been talking the entire show about Stone Smart. We got to give the people something different. They like variety.
I was going to go
so.
De'Ami Brown, you jerk.
No, I won't say De'Ami Brown. I'll say Luke McCaffrey at 3,100 deserves a look for many of the same reasons De'Ami Brown does, except he might actually be good at football because he's a McCaffrey. Also,
pretty bad.
Fair. Also, Brown's defense is 2,200, and the Chiefs are having a lot of trouble pass blocking for Patrick Mahomes. So I think that you could play the Browns. Don't forget about them way down there at 2,200.
Yeah, as long as Myles Garrett plays this week, I think that's certainly an option. He's I don't know if he practiced today, Thursday, but he did not on Wednesday. De'Ami Brown for me. I think that he's the guy that could have a big week. The snaps are there. He might Josh Palmer me, but he's certainly going to see 70-80% of the snaps, and against the Saints, he's at least intriguing.
I mean, it's Tajay Spears if Tony Pollard's out of the lineup, but
Yes.
we've only the whole show. We haven't mentioned Jalen McMillan at 3,700, and Bucky Irvin's going to be out. Looks like Mike Evans might be out. Jalen McMillan 2 touchdowns last week. Chargers defense is a little bit more difficult than the Raiders defense, but that he has taken over as the wide receiver 2 within that Buccaneers offense. He's playing the snaps. The targets are starting to arrive, so maybe Jalen McMillan keeps it rolling there. That's all we got. That's week 15. Devin, give the people some knowledge.
Jeff is never going to allow me to have another Thursday show, because this was vintage Power Grid from like 2017. I had a lot of fun tonight. I know at some of you guys' expense, and all of us are not. Actually, all of us are probably dumber after this show and are not smart. We are not smarter after listening to this for an hour. But we had fun, and that's all that matters. It's week 15. I hope everyone wins a ton of money this week, and we'll see you guys next week.